In this week's video, I want to update y'all on the gear that I got right after my long trip to Korea and Japan last year. If you don't remember what video I originally introduced these items, you can click right here and watch that video. But basically to summarize that video, I bought these 3 items to try and optimize and improve my travel photography setup, and I recently brought them on my trip to Chicago as well as tested them out on some of my photography outings in LA. So anyways, let's get to it. The first item I'll start out with is the Peak Design Travel Tripod. I got this tripod primarily due to the fact that I found one for a really good price, and of course the lightweight and form factor aspect of the tripod itself. When comparing it to my old tripod that I used to bring for travel, my Siri ST125 tripod that I now resorted to using, for these talking head videos, there are quite a number of differences that I've noticed. The first one is the weight form factor. On paper, the differences don't seem too different, but when using them in the field and traveling with them, they just feel very different for some reason. The Peak Design Travel Tripod really is super light. So when I'm going around from location to location with the tripod, since its most condensed form is so efficient in terms of size, you have multiple options of how you want to bring it with you. And what I mean by that is, for example, personally me, I don't like to carry my tripod in the side of my pockets of my bag when walking around the city. I just don't like having my tripod visible in those situations. To me, it just screams, I'm a photographer, look at me. And I like to really keep a low profile when walking around and taking photos in the city. With the Siri ST125 tripod, the weight is similar, but because it's quite bigger than the Peak Design Travel Tripod when in its most condensed form, it does get a bit tricky when trying to fit it in my bag or even my travel suitcase. It can easily be done if I just take off the ball head, which makes it more compact, but that means I would have to take the ball head off and then put it back on every single time I get to a location or leave for a location, which you can probably guess gets pretty annoying real fast. Those are a few positives of the Peak Design Travel Tripod when comparing the two. Now let's get to the possible negatives. The first is the stability of the Peak Design Travel Tripod. When I was taking some long exposure shots in Chicago, I did have some trouble getting clean shots of a specific train running by. Once I noticed my pictures weren't sharp though and adjusted accordingly, I was able to get the clean shots I wanted. But it did concern me with how easily the tripod has moved, as I've been in super windy situations before with my Siri ST125 tripod and had no issues whatsoever getting clean shots there. This could be because I was doing 10 to 15 second exposures in Chicago compared to the 1/6 exposure that I was doing in Korea when it was, super windy there. As well as, the Chicago wind just being super different than anything I've ever experienced. So I'll definitely be keeping an eye on that when using the Peak Design Travel Tripod in my future travels. The next possible negative about the Peak Design Travel Tripod is the fact that I can't lay the legs flat and parallel to the ground or on objects like the Siri ST125 tripod. When using my tripod, especially in compact spaces like an observatory or tight spaces along the road, I like to lean my tripod on some type of railing or surface with 2 legs and balance my tripod with the remaining 3rd leg. I found this very helpful with this, not being a dick to others, photographer or not. People have their own thing that they're doing, and the last thing they probably want is someone blocking the entire sidewalk or spot with their, big ass tripod. With the Peak Design Travel Tripod, you can't lay it flat, unfortunately. The closest you can get to flat is this. And that really doesn't work with how I like to do things the way I did with the Siri ST125 tripod. I could probably work my way around that though by just adjusting the ball head to shoot straight, which I found out unfortunately after playing around with my tripod after my Chicago trip. So I'll definitely test this out in the field on my next trip. But for now, I consider it enough of a negative for me to mention in this video. The second item I'll be talking about is this lens skirt right here that I got from Amazon. The reason I got this lens skirt is because of my time taking photos in observatories of the cityscape when I was in Korea and Japan. If you don't have a lens skirt with you and you're taking photos of a cityscape, you're bound to get reflections in your images from the window pane. Of course, you can work your way around this by just playing around with the type of angles you have your camera at, but sometimes it's impossible to get rid of the reflections, and also, it just makes it a lot quicker to set up your lens skirt, take the picture, which means you have more time to test out other compositions in the observatory or wherever you're at, rather than spending 3 to 5 minutes or longer finding other methods trying to get rid of the reflections. Because trust me, that's what I did when I was in Korea and Japan, and I spent a lot of time doing that. Now that I explained why I got it, let me explain why I got this specific lens skirt. So I did have a lens skirt before this one. Well, that lens skirt was just way too big to bring around and travel with. So I went out and got the smaller one. And my thought process was, unless the quality of the smaller lens skirt was like, super ass or something like that, I thought this would be enough to get the job done. And well, that is true to a certain extent, but there's one thing that I didn't really think would be a problem, or even, surface in my mind that it'd be a problem. During my time in Chicago, I went up to the Skydeck Observatory to get some cityscape shots at night. When I got up there, because of the way the building is positioned within the city, I had to take my pictures with my camera angled a bit away from the window to get a nice frame of the building. The problem with this is because the lens skirt is so small, there wasn't enough lens skirt to cover the lens, which meant that it basically was useless in this situation, in this scenario. Luckily, my friend was there with me, so with the help of him and my jacket, we were able to position the jacket and to cover up the reflection. During my time in Korea and Japan, a lot of the observatories had straightaway views of the cityscape. So in those cases, and in I guess the majority of cases, this lens kit would probably be perfect. But if you ever are in a situation like how I was in Chicago, this lens kit would basically be useless and you'd need a longer one. I guess that's just the pros and cons of having a smaller size travel efficient lens kit. For me though, I'll be keeping this with me for my travels. It's small enough to not take up too much space, and I would assume in most situations, this lens kit would probably be enough to get the job done. The last item I'll be discussing are these pairs of shoes that I got for photography. So going over why I even got these shoes or why they're even related to photography at all. So let me first explain the story. I was in Tokyo and I was heading out to do some street photography. I saw when I looked at the weather app on my phone that it was raining that morning. I didn't really think too much of it honestly because I had taken pictures in the rain before in LA. So I didn't have much of a second thought. But I quickly realized that there was a difference in shooting in the rain in LA, where I had all my shoes available to me, and when traveling, where I only have the shoes that are on my feet. And not even 3 minutes into my walk, I realized that it wasn't gonna be a very pleasant photo walk. I realized I needed not only a shoe that was comfortable to walk in, but also a shoe that will protect my socks from the rain. And after some research, I came across these pairs of shoes, the Nike Pegasus Trail 4 Gore-Tex. Like I mentioned in my other video, I wanted a pair of shoes that can do many things, as I like to travel light and only bring, if not only one pair, 2 pair of shoes max when traveling. So with these shoes, I plan on using them as my everyday walking shoes for like 99% of everything I do. I still don't know if I can use them for hiking, but I've done hikes in my Ultra Boost that I've used for my trip last year in Korea and Japan and had no problem with them whatsoever. So I don't think it'd be too much of a problem to use them, for hiking. For me at least. I've tested the waterproofness of these shoes in my other video, and with further testing during some rainy weather in Chicago, I feel comfortable in saying that these shoes are very good in keeping your feet dry. They're also very comfortable to walk in for an entire day, as I've done a couple of days with 20,000 plus steps in Chicago around the city, and my feet felt great at the end of the day. Really, the only negative I can think of with these shoes, and I don't even know if it's just my feet or something, but for some reason during my flight back from Chicago, my right foot felt like it was being suffocated by the shoe. I had to untie the laces on that shoe in particular so the top of my right foot would stop hurting so much. After that it was fine, but it's just weird as hell that during my flight to Chicago, I felt fine. I'll definitely be keeping an eye on this as it's just a strange thing in my opinion, but I think the shoe is safe overall for me to recommend to others in need of something similar. I'm always looking to improve and make my photography travel setup more efficient, so I'll definitely still be testing these items, especially the travel tripod, to see if it will make it in for my next long-term trip. If you have any tips or recommendations that have worked well for you in your travels, feel free to leave them down in the comment section below. I'll definitely be letting y'all know if I find anything else I think would help or has been helpful for me in my travels. Anyways, that's all for this video. I hope you enjoyed and were able to get some good ideas for your own travel setup. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next video. Later.